You're listening to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall on CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie, who's over at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, I understand you have some breaking news?
Yes, I do. In fact, it's a tease that was just moved by TVA, and I know, Natasha, you've been asking, when are they going to move that poll on political preferences? The poll is coming out tomorrow. They've teased it, but what they're saying right now is that Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon is perceived by more respondents as being a better Premier of Quebec than François Legault. The details will be provided tomorrow. So expect some heads to explode, beginning with that of the Premier of Quebec, and then it'll just go all the way down the line. But yeah, I think as they refer to it in their tease, it looks like something of a tectonic shift is occurring in Quebec politics, even as we speak.
So this is not voter support. This is just who's going to, they think, be perceived as the better premier. Not voter
I would, right now that's, and but that can, when you consider that François Legault is the CAC, even if they're still in the lead, I'd love to see how big their lead is at this point, because it really seems, as we've mentioned on the show, you can't go through all this stuff. You can't keep tripping over stuff, alienating people, getting people angry, picking fights for no reason, and expect the luster to stay on you. And it looks very, very much that this is indeed what is happening.
As Jed Clampett would say, Jim, well, but we'll have to wait and see until tomorrow.
I mean, that's the interesting thing, right? Will he recognize what's causing this and do an about-face and change his mind on things like the tuition hikes, or will he double down and make Anglos pay even more?
Well, maybe there'll just be more trips to his riding for him to cool off.
Well, that doesn't work. So, all right, listen, that's going to be interesting when we see the numbers there, so thank you for bringing that up. I want to turn to the game of chicken, as you described it, between the province and the city over public transit. Jim, I want you to hear this. It sounds like the parents are fighting. Brian?
It took them 11 days to send me this general proposition that we pay for 75% of the deficits of the transport societies, which is not realistic. We don't have that kind of money at the government.
It's not supposed to be that way, and I find it very troubling that even though we came up with ideas and different scenarios, we have a number that comes to us 2 weeks ago. I need to close my budget right now.
She needs to close her budget right now, Jim. Can't wait for Geneviève Guilbeault to say, okay, I'll give you more than the 20% I promised. I know you're running a huge deficit. We're kind of caught in the middle here, aren't we?
Everybody is. In fact, Stéphane Boyer, the mayor of Laval, said that if they maintain their offer, it's going to cost the city of Laval $30 million to cover that deficit. And by the way, in case our listeners are wondering, so what's the big deal? They run a deficit. They can't run a deficit. Municipalities and their attendant agencies cannot run a deficit. They have to have a balanced budget, which is why this is a big deal. But in Laval, Boyer is saying it's going to cost $30 million for him to cover the transit authority's deficit. Here's the problem. $30 million is how much he has to spend on everything else next year in Laval. So whether it's snow removal or whatever, this is a big deal, and we're in the middle. And I don't think at this point there is a bit of drama. There's always a bit of drama, always a bit of performance art involved in politics. But in this particular instance, I think you are going to see cutbacks in service, perhaps not as severe as some municipal authorities are saying. But the bottom line here is, if we start this downward spiral, and the STM has been saying this, if you cut service, you will lose customers, and customers who, and once again, God knows half those customers call this show and say, listen, I decided to keep my car because it's less of a pain than using public transit. We go downward and less customers, less need for the service, less need for funding. It's a vicious circle. And I cannot, for the life of me, understand why Legault, through Geneviève Guilbeault as transport minister, has decided to put the boots to, let's face it, it's supposed to be every transit authority in Quebec, but the big ones, Longueuil, Montreal, and Laval, are the ones who really are jammed up against the wall. And a lot of our listeners rely on those agencies to get them in and out of work. So this is all of it coming at a very, very bad time. And for the government to stand fast and say, well, no, we don't have the money. Well, as we just heard And my hat's off to the union official you guys are talking to in the last half hour, because for a while there, that burden of English was getting heavier and heavier, but he managed to make it to the end of the show. But as you said, they've got money for all these other things, and yet they don't seem to have money for things, for very fundamental issues. And this is what is going to be a growing problem for this government, for François Legault, and quite frankly, for the notion that that somehow this political entity continues to enjoy a leadership role. I think the only thing the CAQ is leading anyone to in this province right now is a dead end or a problem. And I'm sorry, but that seems to be a very definite change of brand, and one that's going to stick with this government.
Can I just ask, did you see the Marc Tanguay post today about hydro, Jim?
No, sir.
So Marc Tanguay, who is the interim leader of the Liberals, gets up in the House. I'm reading this in French, but basically accusing, he said, in 2018, François Legault had a surplus in electricity of 5 times the size of La Romaine, which is the one they just introduced a couple of weeks ago. In 2023, he says the CAQ no longer has a surplus in electricity, basically accusing Pierre Fitzgibbon of signing all these backroom deals with companies coming here and saying, hey, no longer do we have a surplus, which means all of us are going to pay more at the same time that some companies today found out they're going to be paying less.
Well, it's very interesting, because I would suspect that Monsieur Tanguay's post was based on a Radio-Canada report that was posted this morning, saying that there are scores of companies in Quebec that can expect to have big discounts on their electricity in exchange for simply settling in Quebec. So honestly, we're like I say, sooner or later this stuff always comes home to roost. And in this particular instance, and in these particular these 2 weeks, they all seem to be coming home to roost at the same time. It's entirely possible that Pierre Fitzgibbon, who, as we know, marches to the beat of his own drummer named Pierre Fitzgibbon, has probably, signed all kinds of deals in a lure to get people to come to Quebec. The problem is, and it still seems strange for me as a lifelong Quebecer to be saying this, but for us to say we have an electricity shortage seems like a rather alien concept to me. And yet somehow this government has managed to pull it off. And once again, winter's coming. Hydro bills are going out. How is François Legault going to tap dance his way out of this one? Who knows? Tomorrow's poll will be interesting. Maybe the one next month will be even more so.
You want to ask the immigration question? Because this is the other thing we're going to talk about.
No, that's not what I was just thinking about. Back to the transit issue. I was just thinking about seniors. I think it's great that seniors get to ride the transit for free, but I wonder if that's something that's going to be dialed back if they can't come to a conclusion, if they can't come to an agreement on this. How much
I'm not
does that
entirely
cost?
sure that's going to put them over the top for the tens of millions of dollars for that deficit that they have to cover. Because don't forget as well, the big run-ups, the big deficit items are in operating costs. It's not in fares. So I'm not entirely sure that would make a huge difference.
Okay.
But all that said, no matter what age you are, I think if this keeps going on unchecked, if this game of chicken continues, someone somewhere who's listening to this show right now is going to wind up with less public transit service come January.
And paying more for
Absolutely.
it,
All right, listen, real quick, on this immigration issue, so we know about the carbon tax and the price that Trudeau and the government is paying for having said to the Atlantic provinces, just you for now, we really need you. Is this now starting to happen on immigration as well? Are we seeing a shift here in the government's policy?
I can guarantee we'll be talking about that tomorrow, because Mark Miller stands up and says what the immigration levels will be for Canada for the next 4 years. At least those are their projections. And right now, given the sounds he's making about rejigging the entire immigration system because it's not working and there's a housing crisis, I'm really thinking the words limits or levels of 500,000 a year are going to be edited rather severely tomorrow.
We shall wait and find out. There you go. All right, Jim, thank you.
Adama.